Hi everyone, this is my run on the Mechanized Sentry Lufenia, and if you are interested in a more detailed breakdown of the Lufenia mechanics for this stage as well as some overview on the strategy, I will put a link in the video description on another video that you can check out. So this fight covers a very cheesy strategy in the sense that I decided to try to just delete all the boss's turns from the start of the fight till the end and deny the boss from taking a single turn. The problem, of course, is getting around the Lufenia orb because the Lufenia orb will gradually tick down to 0 unless the bosses are disabled on their turn. So to get around that, I put together a party that provides very high DPS to allow me to kill off the bosses before the orb actually ticks down to 0. So before going into the actual battle, I'll be covering a bit on the party setup that I used to accomplish this somewhat cheesy strategy. Firstly, of course, I put in Amidatelion because the turn deletion comes in very handy. Also, one thing to note that the boss has a mechanic in place that will sometimes prevent delay, which is something called machine shift. It will push its turn back by 2 turns when it uses this. However, once it uses machine shift, the bosses will not suffer a delay when they get broken. So characters that rely on pseudo breaks to delay the bosses such as Ardyn or maybe Struggle will not work as well in this sense. However, of course, Amidatelion still takes the cake here because turn deletion bypasses any immunity to delay from breaks or delay at all because you outright just delete the boss's turns from the turn bar. So I put in Amidatelion in the party, and I also have a second Amidatelion that I use as a friend support. This allows me in total 6 users of LD and 8 users, 6 from my Amidatelion and 2 from the support of Mega Flare, which also deletes turns. So 2 Amidatelions can actually delay or delete turns for the entire battle. The only problem here on is getting enough DPS to kill off the boss before the Lufenia orb counts down to 0 and explodes. So to get around that, first of all, I put in Kurasame in the party. Kurasame works really well with this strategy because if the bosses don't get a single turn, they will never fully charge their recast bar, and therefore they will never be able to dispel all their debuffs, which means that at the start of the fight, if you use Kurasame's LD and increase the hero to 5 stacks, the bosses will take 30% increased damage for the entire fight, as long as you can keep up with the turn deletion, of course. To round off the party, I decided to use Vivi as my third party member because Vivi represents a very strong DPS character even at this stage of the game. Usually with Vivi you do need to consider healing, but because the strategy around here prevents the bosses from taking a single turn, you don't have to worry about any incoming damage, so the HP drain from Vivi's ability doesn't really matter. In actual fact, the HP drain from Vivi actually helps out the strategy because it will trigger the blessing from Odin's summon. So if you read Odin's description, once any party member's HP drops below 80%, that party member will benefit from an additional 30% increase in attack. So the first moment where Vivi uses his LD, you will activate Odin's blessing and benefit from a permanent 30% increase in attack for the rest of the battle. Do note though that you need to manage the debuffs in the fight. So for example, Amidatelion herself inflicts 4 frame debuffs, and Kurasame already inflicts 1 frame debuff in his hero, so that's a total of 5 debuffs. If you equip all of Vivi's passives, he normally can inflict 2 debuffs. One is a fire resist down and the other is his poison ability. So because you want his fire resist down to stick to increase his overall damage in the fight, you do want to unequip his poison passive, which is Dark Soul. Otherwise you run a risk of overriding his fire resist down when he poisons the bosses. You can see I also removed his buff speed up passive, and this is really a matter of preference. The reason I do this is to ensure that his EX bar charges a little bit more quickly in between his turns. But you can mix and match depending also on what artifact passives you have for Vivi. So that's it, I'll be covering a bit more. One last thing before we head into the actual battle. Quick note about Vivi's LD is that he only has, of course, 3 users of his LD, which is quite limited. And the approach I took in this battle is to use his LD corresponding to each time the Lufenia orb is up. So if you look at the boss description, there are actually 3 times when the Lufenia orb is present in the fight. So from 100% to 79%, and then from 59% to 39%, the second time the orb will be up, and finally from 29% to 0. So essentially, since there's 3 phases in the fight where the orb is up, the approach that I took is to use Vivi's LD once during each of the phases, which will allow me to have the burst I need to kill off the boss before the Lufenia orb triggers. So I'll move on to the actual battle. I'll see you there. So the first phase from 100% to 80% is pretty straightforward. Ideally, you want Kurasame to start off first so that he can apply his LD and immediately ramp up hero to 5 stacks. With Amidatelion, I start off immediately with one of his LD so that he also gains his LD buff. And with Vivi, I went EX into LD. With Amidatelion, you want to keep a very close eye on the turn bar. When you need to, you can use Mega Flares in between his LDUs to delete turns as such. And when you see there are multiple turns before the next boss turn, you can try to squeeze in his Comet to refresh his Comet buff or use his EX for massive damage. However, you really do need to pay special attention to the turn order. Otherwise you risk allowing the bosses to get turns. Looking back, there is some room for error. The first turn, as far as I can tell, the boss takes is always just a standard brave attack. So you can actually allow the boss each to take 1 turn, which wouldn't really harm the overall strategy. But the gist of the video here is really proof that you can actually kill off the boss without them ever taking a single turn. Okay, so at 79% the orb will disappear, and I only needed 3 of Vivi's LD charge to bring them down to this point. Because this is somewhat of a honeymoon phase because the orb isn't present, and you can see I've deleted their turns, So this phase is essentially just a punching bag phase where you just do attacks to deplete the boss's health. Because of this, I do not refresh Vivi's LD once it becomes 0 stacks, and I'm saving his second LD for the next orb phase. With Amidatelion at the start of this phase, you need to keep a watch for his Comet buff, and here his Comet is only at 1 turn left, so I refreshed the buff by using another Comet. You do need to still keep a close eye on the turn bar and have enough of Amidatelion's turns to delete the boss turns before they come up again. Okay, so at 59%, the orb will return with an 18 turn count and will last until the boss reaches 39% health. So at this stage, you want to quickly prepare Vivi's second LD again so that you have enough firepower to bring the boss to the next honeymoon phase before the orb triggers down to 0. So here I ran out of Amidatellion's LD, and I was debating whether I should allow the boss to get a turn each so that I can bring in my support Amidatelion later, but I decided to see whether or not I could complete the fight without the boss taking a single action, so I just went ahead and swapped Amidatelion in at this point for the new Amidatelion, and then went ahead to use LD to delete turns again. Normally I will also pop summon, but I'm trying to save summon for the last 29% health because at that point in time you need the additional turns for DPS before the orb ticks down to 0, because it's really 29% health that you need to get through for the last orb phase. So here at 49%, the boss will get the fuel generator again, and you want to try to use heavy hitting attacks to eat through their brave shield as soon as possible. So one good example is Vivi's double fire. And the bonus of using Vivi is his Embers of Darkness full-out attack will also help to chew through the Brave Shield. With the support Amidatelion, I tend to save the LD use for later in the fight, and the only reason for this is in case you happen to luckily trigger a launch at the later part of the fight, you can then use your support Amidatellion's LD skill to create a launch with 2 juicy follow-up HP attacks. Okay, so this is the second and final honeymoon phase where there's no Lufenia orb present. So again here, your Vivi's LD should be more or less running low, so mine is at the last charge. And Vivi only has 1 LD skill left, so I'm saving that for the final 29% health. So this 10% is really just a breathing room for you to use standard DPS to burn them down. Okay, so coming to the last 29% health, I think one key thing about this strategy is to try to save your summon for the final phase here at the 29% health. The reason being, the last Lufenia orb will only appear with a count of 17, which is relatively little considering that you need to deplete 29% of the boss's health. So having a summon here really provides you the breathing room, the 6 turns that you additionally have to burst down the boss in this phase. If you have any DPS with burst mode, you can also consider using burst mode here. So I popped my summon because the boss's turns are about to come up and support Amidatelion is over. So I only have 3 more users of Mega Flare with my own Amidatelion. So I popped summon to prevent the boss from taking a turn, and inside summon I use Amidatelion to continue to delete the boss's turns again. So this is Vivi's final LD skill use, where I'm hoping it's enough to burn down the boss in their last phase of the fight. So you will come pretty close at the end here. Although I really believe that even the boss takes a turn here, it shouldn't matter that much. However, there are some things that can help you get that little bit of damage in. Near the end there, you can use Kurasame's AA skill because his AA is also an HP attack. So that will provide you some additional turns of damage. And you can also use Vivi's AA to trigger the Embers of Darkness follow-up attack. Using both Kurasame's and Vivi's additional ability also has the benefit of delaying turns, hopefully enough so that the boss will regen their Brave, allowing you to break them and delay them for another turn each. So here I was looking at the turn order, and unfortunately using focus will still let boss B act before Vivi's turn again. So I decided to buy some time using Vivi's AA, hoping that boss B will regen Brave. I did make one mistake here. I actually have Vivi's double fire, which could have ended the fight here and then. But I was so hung up on using Vivi's AA that I completely forgot about his double fire. And unfortunately, I used his AA until the double fire buff expired. So this is really a big mistake on my part. I could have ended the fight a couple of turns earlier. Having said that, I did manage to allow the boss to regen Brave, and I still managed to complete the fight comfortably. Here comes Meteor! Boom! That's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you did, do leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It really helps a lot. Till then, I'll see you in the next Lufenia fight. Bye bye.